reeling from a deadly blast. Nearly 100 killed after a bomb attack near one of Kabul's most secured areas.
Waiting for a decision, the world awaits President Donald Trump's final word on the Paris Climate Accord.
And reversing yet another Obama legacy, President Trump is expected to roll back the former administration's policy on Cuba. Thanks for being with us, everyone. I'm Amra Walker.
And I'm Michael Holmes. Welcome to CNN Today. A bustling street in Kabul, Afghanistan's diplomatic quarter, teeming with workers, shoppers and children on their way to school, and then suddenly a titanic blast.
Take a look at this video and just look closely at the upper left corner of your screen. A huge bomb hidden inside a water delivery truck exploding there, and amid the smoke and rubble, almost 100 dead and hundreds of others injured.
Now, no group has yet claimed responsibility, but as Ian Lee shows us, the bombing once again revealing just how unstable Afghanistan remains.
Blaring sirens and a towering plume of black smoke. These are the latest sights and sounds of Wednesday morning rush hour in Kabul. Scores of people killed and hundreds injured after a truck bomb ripped through the city's diplomatic quarter. Among the dead, an Afghan BBC driver taking journalists to work and a security officer involved in the protection of the German embassy. The first few days of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan replaced by carnage and chaos on the streets and overwhelmed hospitals. The blast, one of the worst attacks to hit the country in years, felt blocks away.
I heard a very loud bang, and then I don't remember what happened next. The waves of the explosion were so powerful that you could see a lot of people in the hospital wounded by shattered windows and collapsed walls.
16 years after the U.S.-led invasion of Afghanistan, with deteriorating security and gains by both the Taliban and ISIS, Kabul seems increasingly unstable. The Taliban, which controls large chunks of the country, denies any involvement in the deadly blast. ISIS, known for carrying out increasingly deadly attacks, silent on this bombing. As Afghan civilians suffer the most, the vast majority killed in such attacks, the international community calls out for more blood and treasure. NATO currently assessing a request for more troops, while U.S. President Donald Trump weighs a Pentagon plan to send up to 5,000 additional soldiers and increase airstrikes against Taliban and ISIS targets. Ian Lee, CNN.
Well, a little bit earlier, we asked a veteran terrorism expert for his views on the Kabul bombing and what it says about Afghanistan's long and intractable conflict.
Jonathan Schanzer is the Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and also a former U.S. Treasury Department terrorism analyst.
I think it's really getting at the heart of the debate that we're having here in this country about whether it's time for the United States to pull out or double down. But as you noted, Afghanistan has not been a country that has been easy to stabilize. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban found their way there in the mid-1990s. We tried to root them out. There was obviously a war, an ongoing war, and a sustained effort, and we're still finding that as soon as we pull out, they find more ground to conquer, they being, of course, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and now we have ISIS in the mix as well. So this is a challenge that doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon.
Now, nobody has been actually labelled as responsible, but it's interesting that Afghan security intelligence is saying they believe it's the Haqqani network. Now, this is an insurgent group, of course. It is linked to the Taliban. The Taliban says it was not them. How significant would it be if it is the Haqqani network? Because, of course, it then brings Pakistan into play. They have safe haven in Pakistan. That is a major problem.
It would be a huge problem, and obviously Pakistan would come under significant fire for that. Although I have to say that it strikes me as, I don't want to say implausible, but very difficult to believe, given that the Taliban and the Haqqani network have long cooperated together. It would really mark a division that we did not see coming between these actors that are really seen as one and the same. I think it's important to note that sometimes it takes a day or two for groups to claim responsibility. I think probably the finger that most people are pointing right now is to ISIS. We know, of course, that ISIS has been involved in attacks around the Muslim world, really sowing havoc during the month of Ramadan. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was ISIS, much more surprised if it was, in fact, the Haqqani network.
Tell us more about the ISIS footprint in Afghanistan and how much of a threat it is in that country, because it's not as big of a threat as it is as the Taliban is, right?
No, it's not. And clearly what we do need to be focusing on is the Taliban. They continue to conquer territory. They've been conquering provinces. As soon as we leave, they come back in. I think they're in more than half the provinces in Afghanistan right now. That's where the real threat is. I think there's been a tendency to want to focus on ISIS because of the dangers that it poses in Iraq and Syria. And it's, of course, the sort of top terrorist enemy of the United States. But it is certainly not the kind of threat in Afghanistan that we're looking at elsewhere.
It seems incredible. Yeah, it seems incredible that we are still talking about this 16 years on. I mean, the big picture here has got to be talks, doesn't it? I mean, the Taliban has to be seen as a negotiating partner rather than a foe to be vanquished, because nobody is vanquishing the Taliban at the moment.
Well, no one is vanquishing them, although we have to say that we have tried to work through this with the Taliban in the past. Of course, the Qataris set up sort of a quasi-embassy. Very little was accomplished there with the U.S. reaching out to the Taliban. There was an attempt to distinguish between capital T and lowercase t Taliban, those we could work with and those that we couldn't. I don't see the Taliban as being interested in negotiation. Of course, it would be wonderful if we could negotiate an exit, but we have to remember that the Taliban are very much cut from the same cloth as al-Qaeda and ISIS in terms of ideology. This is a brutal ideological Islamist organization that seeks to destabilize and ultimately conquer Afghanistan again.
Jonathan Schanzer there. For the third time in the past 9 days, Paris's iconic Eiffel Tower has again gone dark to honor terror victims.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? The French landmark dimming its brilliant lights a short time ago to again mourn those killed and injured, this time in Wednesday's horrific bombing in Kabul. And that follows the tower's tribute just one night ago for the victims of Tuesday's multiple bombings in Iraq and the lowering of the lights on May 23rd after last week's terror attack in Manchester, England.
In Washington, U.S. President Donald Trump says a decision on the Paris Climate Agreement is coming very soon. But already we're hearing from two senior U.S. officials who say Mr. Trump is expected to withdraw from the deal.
Now, that move would, of course, mark a major break from international partners in the fight against global warming. Our Athena Jones, tracking developments, has the latest now from Washington.
For President Trump, pulling out of the landmark Paris Climate Accord would be another campaign promise kept. And a signal to the nearly 200 countries that joined the accord that they should take his America First mantra seriously.
We're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement and stop all payments of the United States tax dollars to UN global warming programs.
While the president is promising an official announcement soon,
you're going to find out very soon.
Two senior officials tell CNN the decision has already been made, though they caution the precise mechanism for withdrawal hasn't been determined, and plans could still change until Trump makes his decision public.
He's the ultimate decider, and when he has a decision to make, he'll let you know.
The expected move already prompting harsh criticism from opponents like House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, who called it a stunning abdication of American leadership, a grave threat to our planet's future, and a threat to national security. Even some fellow Republicans are questioning the message it sends to the rest of the world.
Well, it means that the leader of the Republican Party is in a different spot than the rest of the world. It would be taken as a statement that climate change is not a problem, not real. That would be bad for the party, bad for the country.
In fact, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer dodged a question Tuesday on whether the president believes humans contribute to climate change.
I don't know. I honestly haven't asked him that.
Other Republicans are applauding the plan and playing down its impact on global relations.
The United States has great relationships throughout Europe. Is going to have those relationships with or without this agreement.
The decision would also be a victory for the nationalist wing of the White House, led by Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. Meanwhile, the president's daughter and top advisor, Ivanka Trump, has been pushing her father to stay in the accord, as have prominent figures like former Vice President Al Gore, Tesla founder Elon Musk, and a long list of companies. The president, who met Tuesday with Scott Pruitt, the Environmental Protection Agency administrator who favors withdrawal, met today with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who believes America should remain in the deal. A day of meetings that followed a confusing midnight tweet from the president saying only, despite the constant negative press, covfefe. Trump, whose sources tell CNN has been feeling angry, lonely, and withdrawn in recent days, later deleted the tweet.
The president and a small group of people know exactly what he meant.
So that curious answer from Spicer there about something most of us took to be a typo on Twitter is now raising more questions. Meanwhile, when it comes to the Russia investigation, Spicer did have a clear answer on that. He said that all future questions about that matter would be referred to outside counsel Mark Kasowitz. And one more thing about that briefing with Spicer, it was audio only, no cameras allowed, and it lasted just 12 minutes. Back to you.
Thanks to Athena Jones for that. Well, as you know, Donald Trump may be looking to keep a campaign promise, but what are the repercussions for a decision to withdraw from the climate deal?
Now, a little bit earlier, we spoke with Jeffrey Sachs, the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, and this was his reaction to the possible withdrawal.
It's so shocking with the entire world aligned on the urgency and the importance of fighting global warming, with the vast majority of Americans on side and saying stay in the Paris Climate Agreement, with his Secretary of State saying stay in the Paris Climate Agreement, with ExxonMobil, of all companies, saying stay in the Paris Climate Agreement. It shows what really is going on, a very high level of corruption, because there is big money, the Koch brothers money and other big interests that have swayed many senators and congressmen, and they're the ones telling Trump, get out. That's the oil and gas interest speaking, not the American people. And the world is aghast. I can tell you, I'm in Europe right now. People are completely shocked at this.
Well, disagreements over climate change, talk of a staff shake-up and swirling questions involving Russia.
This is the current situation inside a White House that appears to be in constant turmoil. Joining us with his perspective is Asawin Sutsang, politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Great to have you on the program. Let's start with the climate change and the climate change accord and the possibility that President Trump will withdraw from it. I'm hearing that meetings inside the Oval Office or the West Wing about the Paris Accord is getting quite contentious, with the president being pulled in both directions. What are you hearing?
That's indeed true. What this debate over the Paris Climate Accords has done, once again, within the Trump White House and Trump administration, has sort of brought to the fore the divisions within Trump's political inner circle. There's the so-called nationalist camp that is defined by people like Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, Jeff Sessions, Scott Pruitt, who are huge fans of wanting to pull out of the Paris Agreement, whereas advisors such as his economic advisor, Gary Cohn, and of course his advisor and daughter, Ivanka Trump, have been urging him to stay in. So what this has done is sort of pitted the camp of Trump's confidants against each other once again.
Yeah, and not for the first time. There's been different camps in there from the beginning, really. I mean, it was interesting, Gloria, your article in the Daily Beast, of course, but Gloria Borger on CNN.com writing that the president is, she puts it, increasingly isolated in the White House, lonely, angry and not happy with much of anyone. What are you hearing from your sources about how he is at the moment?
Well, it is certainly true that the president does feel isolated. I mean, that's true with any president of the United States. It's a very lonely job. Having said that, there are reasons to believe that this president feels rather a more intense version of that. His wife currently does not reside in the White House with him. And as evidenced last night and many nights before, there are times when he is just alone watching TV and getting angry on Twitter. So it's a very interesting situation to have the leader of the free world in.
And
Yeah, exactly.
does that mean he's going to be, I guess, perhaps taking it out on his staff? I mean, we're hearing reports of a possible staff shakeup. We just saw just yesterday the resignation of his White House communications director for quote-unquote personal reasons, but also there's been rumors swirling about what Sean Spicer's fate might be and if he's on the way out.
Oh, certainly. And many members of President Trump's senior staff have been reportedly on the chopping block for weeks, if not months now. That ranges from Bannon to Chief of Staff Reince Priebus to Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Having said that, there is a long distance to go between Trump complaining about his senior staffers and actually bringing the axe down. Having said that, what we think from my sources in the West Wing and people I talked to in the administration, that there is a much greater chance of happening than him having a slaughter of senior staff, is bringing in padding in the form of either outside advisors or people into the West Wing to help beef up their so-called war room to help deal with Russia-related scandals and fallout. That includes, or is likely to include, top campaign aides, including former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, who of course was fired after bruising a female Breitbart reporter, and Citizens United president and former deputy campaign manager David Bossie.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. Asawin Sutsang, politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. And we're going to take a short break here on CNN Today. When we come back, the Russian banker and Putin ally who met with Mr. Trump's son-in-law last year is not easy to track down.
But Matthew Chance did. Caught up with him, asked some tough questions. We'll show you the encounter. Also, the US propping open its diplomatic door to Cuba last year.
Now there is word President Trump may be ready to at least partially close that door again. Still to come. We're going to go live to Havana. Patrick Ottman standing by. Stay with us.
That seagull's not going to steal my phone, is it?
Indonesia, a culture in transition. Meet the people, trying to keep traditions.
We need to educate the people, the children, because the batik is our culture.
While creating a new modern identity.
Our mission is to draw global attention to the cuisine.
The Keepers, Saturday on CNN. June the 8th. Elections in the United Kingdom. What do they mean for you, your neighbours, the rest of Europe, and beyond? Join CNN for every angle on the run-up to and the results of this historic event, and what this vote means going forward. CNN has your UK election coverage front and centre. Special coverage starts June 8th on CNN. Philippe Chatrier Court is raked and ready for Roland Garros to begin.
I love Paris. It's a magical place.
The best tennis players in the world are finding their feet on the red clay. Can Novak Djokovic extend his reign over Roland Garros? Or will Rafa Nadal take it back and win his 10th French Open crown?
Definitely going to be the player to beat.
Join us at Roland Garros for a Grand Slam edition of Open Court, Saturday on CNN, in association with Longines.
All right, now to inquiries into the Trump camp's ties to Russia. According to a source, the fired FBI director James Comey is going to testify publicly on Capitol Hill.
And he's expected to confirm bombshell allegations that the U.S. president pressured him to kill the investigation into a former top aide. Jessica Schneider is covering this live from CNN in Washington. Quite a bombshell we're expecting.
Yeah, definitely, Amber and Michael. You know, James Comey's much anticipated testimony could happen as soon as next week, according to our sources. The details of that testimony, when it will happen and how it will happen, they're still being determined. But sources say the fired FBI director will once again sit before the Senate Intelligence Committee and publicly recount his run-ins with the president.
James Comey is expected to testify as soon as next week before the Senate Intelligence Committee about any possible pressure he felt from President Trump to drop the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Flynn's ties to Russia. Sources tell CNN Comey documented his February 14th meeting with President Trump, detailing the president's plea this way. I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. The president was on the attack Wednesday morning, tweeting about, quote, the false or misleading testimony by James Comey, John Brennan, witch hunt. Comey has spoken with special counsel Robert Mueller to work out the parameters of his testimony, and Comey will likely sit down with Mueller afterward. This all comes as congressional investigators are widening the scope of people they've reached out to, at least 9 Trump associates so far.
Thank you, Chairman.
The House Intelligence Committee has issued subpoenas to Michael Flynn and President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Cohen initially resisted requests from Congress, saying the demands were overly broad, but has said he would cooperate with a subpoena and that he has nothing to hide. Michael Flynn is expected to hand over business and personal records to the Senate Intelligence Committee by June 6th. And the House Intelligence Committee has asked for documents from former White House communications official Boris Epstein, who is working with his attorney to cooperate.
His testimony postponed indefinitely at the request of Democrats.
This moment on Fox News about former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page seemingly grabbed the president's attention. He tweeted 30 minutes after it aired. So now it is reported that the Democrats who have excoriated Carter Page about Russia don't want him to testify. Carter Page tells CNN his testimony before the House Intelligence Committee was tentatively scheduled for next week, but has been pushed back a week.
Thank you so much. Mr. Gorkoff, a quick question. What did you really speak to Jared Kushner about in New York when you met him in December? No comments.
And the Russian bank chairman with close ties to President Vladimir Putin not answering questions about his December meeting with Jared Kushner. Kushner's push to create secret communication with Russia also drawing scrutiny from investigators.
We're trying to figure out exactly why for him in particular was the reason to have back channel. It's one thing to have national security back channel. It's another thing for other individuals in the White House. So that's a very reasonable question. We're going to look to try to get clear answers.
And new today, the White House is now refusing to answer any questions about the Russia probe. In fact, Press Secretary Sean Spicer announced it today. He said that all future questions must be referred directly to the recently retained outside counsel. His name is Mark Kasowitz. Amber and Michael.
Well, Jessica, thanks so much. Jessica Schneider there for us. Appreciate it.
All right, further details now on the ties between Mr. Trump's son-in-law and that Russian banker. Here's Matthew Chance in that encounter.
Well, Sergei Gorkov has emerged as a key figure in these sprawling allegations surrounding the Trump administration and its connections with the Kremlin. He heads an institution called Vneshekonombank, a Russian bank sanctioned by the United States. He was appointed to that post by Vladimir Putin, and like the Russian president, he's a former Russian intelligence officer. And it's with this man that Jared Kushner, President Trump's special advisor and son-in-law, had a private, if not secret, meeting in New York at Trump Tower last December. Now, the White House says the meeting was about diplomacy, that Kushner attended in his capacity as a Trump transition team member. The bank, however, insists the talks were about business and that Kushner represented his family's sprawling property empire. Well, Sergei Gorkov is a very hard man to track down, but I caught up with him after he'd spoken to economics students at a university here in the Russian city of St. Petersburg.
Mr. Gorkov, a quick question. What did you really speak to Jared Kushner about in New York when you met him in December?
No comments. Did you talk about sanctions? Excuse me.
No comments. Well, what was discussed? The White House says it was a diplomatic meeting, that Kushner met you as part of the transition team. Your bank says it was a business meeting.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, clearly, Mr. Gorkov was not at all happy about being confronted on the issue of his contact with the Trump team. We did offer his office the opportunity to answer our questions more fully, given the controversy in the United States, but the response was a firm no. Matthew Chance, CNN, St. Petersburg in Russia.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is escalating a war of words with Chelsea Clinton. It all started when Mr. Duterte made these remarks last Friday, absolving his soldiers of any future rapes under martial law. Here it is.
For this martial law and the consequences of martial law and the ramifications of martial law, I and I alone would be responsible. Trabaho lang po. Nagtarip ko ng tatlo, aminin ko na akin yun.
Extraordinary. Mr. Duterte has since said he was being sarcastic, but many, of course, have criticised the remarks, including Chelsea Clinton. First, Clinton responded to the comments by tweeting, "Not funny, ever."
Then she responded to another tweeter saying, Duterte is a murderous thug with no regard for human rights. It's important to keep pointing that out, and that rape is never a joke. Well, on Wednesday, Mr. Duterte fired back at Clinton, invoking a scandal involving her father, former President Bill Clinton.
When your father, the President of the United States, was screwing Lewinsky and the girls there in the White House, how did you feel? Did you slam your father? Be careful because you live in a glass house. Ulitin ko nga, I repeat, when President Clinton was Lewinsky, what was your statement or your reaction?
Wow.
Yeah, wow indeed. So far, Chelsea Clinton has not responded to that attack, which we did have to bleep part of, obviously.
All right, up next, President Trump may be reversing new, more open U.S. policy on Cuba, and he may be ready to do it soon.
We're going to get the view from Havana when we come back here on CNN Today. Also, we're going to talk to an activist who is trying to make consumers more aware of the risks of slave labor, often the hidden secrets behind the products we consume.
That's ahead in CNN's Freedom Project. Don't go away.
We've polished him up and I'm back on the road with Freddie Brexit. There's no better way to get out and about and discover what the British people are thinking. If we want to get to the heart of the UK election, this is the way to do it. Join me with Freddie Brexit live all this week on CNN.
Russia, a vibrant country with a wealth of history and culture. And now, cashing in on a wealth of business opportunities. In a CNN special, John Defterios explores how the largest country in the world is positioning itself for global growth. Bold moves, complex relationships. From politics to economics, see what makes this country a major player in our world. Marketplace Russia, Sunday on CNN.
Because leaving home doesn't mean living less. Stay at a hotel that has the news source you trust. Stay at a CNN partner hotel.
somebody to tell you their story, it's something I take really seriously, and it's not something you can just parachute in and ask somebody to open their heart to you. To peel away the layers to get to the heart of the person who you're telling a story about.
France will never give up against the terrorists.
And delve beneath the surface of what's happening. You can hear their story, and you're going to do their story justice. You have to show yourself to them.
How high was the water? The water was as tall as that tree.
CNN's the right place to tell their story.
I'm Natalie Allen.
And I'm George Howell. This is CNN.
Hello and welcome back to CNN Today, everyone. I'm Michael Holmes.
I'm Amara Walker. Time now to get straight to our top stories. A massive suicide bomb hidden in a water delivery truck has exploded in the diplomatic quarter of Afghanistan's capital. It happened during the height of the morning rush hour as the streets were packed with commuters, shoppers, and children.
At least 90 people were killed, some 400 others injured. No group claiming responsibility as yet. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will make a decision very soon on the Paris Climate Agreement, but already two senior U.S. officials telling CNN Donald Trump is expected to withdraw from the deal.
And that would be a major break from international partners in the fight to curb global warming. And according to an unnamed source, fired FBI Director James Comey plans to testify publicly about his confrontations with Mr. Trump as early as next week.
He's expected to confirm bombshell allegations that the U.S. president pressured him to end the investigation into the Trump camp's ties to Russia. Well, after months of rumours, President Trump may be poised to put the brakes on one of his predecessor's biggest achievements.
An official involved in the review of U.S. policy on Cuba says Mr. Trump could roll back parts of Obama administration's efforts to soften relations with the island nation. CNN's Patrick Gottman joining us now from Havana. So President Trump not expecting to reverse all of Obama's changes to Cuba policy. So what can we expect?
You just think about all the history that's been made in the last 2 years of the Obama administration. Of course, the U.S. Embassy being reopened here after a half century, flight service being reestablished, cruise ships coming from the U.S. for the first time, and now hordes of American visitors descending every day despite a U.S. travel ban. So all that happened because of President Obama. It was really the most major shift we've seen in U.S.-Cuba relations since Fidel Castro's revolution took power, and President Trump has now vowed and is getting closer to unmaking some of that history. He is not, we're told, going to pull the embassy in severe diplomatic relations as he had threatened during the presidential campaign, but he is going to do a lot of very symbolic actions. We expect him to make an announcement that there'll be no more unilateral concessions, that if there's any advancement in the relation between Cuba and the U.S., that Cuba will have to give something. That was one of the things that President Obama was criticized for, giving away too much. He's going to insist on the human rights situation improving in Cuba, and that some of the U.S. fugitives who spent decades and decades here avoiding the long arm of American law enforcement will be returned as well. He's going to bar, we're told, the U.S. companies from doing any business deals that directly benefit the Cuban government. So a lot of reversals of Obama policies, and perhaps more to come, because they're still finalizing some of the details, and we expect as well that there will be more controls on American visitors coming to Cuba. President Obama has, despite the fact there's still a travel ban, has basically made it that any American who wanted to visit Cuba could, and President Trump, we're told, is going to be clamping down on that somewhat.
And I suppose a lot of people are sort of asking why, but a lot of businesses are going to be saying, oh my goodness, because they've invested a lot of money in getting this all going again, and are making a lot of money, presumably.
Absolutely, and it's just getting going now. If you're American Airlines or JetBlue or Carnival Cruises, you're just starting to see the benefits of many years of work. So they are pushing back and very concerned that this is going to affect their bottom line and perhaps even cost them jobs, which is something President Trump has said he wanted to create, but this has a lot to do with domestic politics. President Trump, to win Florida, promised the hardline Cuban-American voters there that he would undo this policy, and he's following through on that promise. So he's faced a lot of pressure from certain Cuban-American congresspeople, and as well, there is just the sense that if President Obama was for it, that he's against it, and to undo one of parts of, at least, of President Obama's one of his major foreign policy initiatives, well, that's reason enough to do this. You know, you have to think back that before he was candidate, Trump, just regular businessman, Donald Trump wanted to open up hotels in Cuba. So it's quite a reversal, but we are told to expect as soon as next month that he will begin dismantling some of the historic changes that President Obama brought about here in Cuba.
Yeah, but it's been, what, over a year or so? Correct me on how much time has passed since President Obama started the normalization of relations with Cuba. You've been there for some time, Patrick. How much change have you seen since some of these, you know, travel and trade restrictions have been lifted?
You know, it's incremental on some parts. You know, obviously the human rights situation remains the same. Cuba's criticized for its human rights records, and we don't expect a tougher line is necessarily going to force them to change anything on that front because they've faced tougher sanctions in the past. But in terms of private industry in Cuba, there has been an explosion. There's simply not enough hotel rooms, not enough restaurants, and Airbnb has seen the most growth of any country in the world in Cuba. You walk down the street here, and there are apartments for rent, regular Cubans renting out their apartment, making a lot of money by Cuban standards, renting their apartments to Americans by and large. So this has been something that has really just changed the face of Cuba, changed Cubans' lives, and they are eager for that to continue. They want to have more business relationships, more visitors from the United States, and many Cubans that I've talked to are afraid that rolling back these Obama-era policies is going to hurt them.
Well, it's certainly going to be major changes after major changes. We'll see how it unfolds and how much President Trump does roll back. Patrick, good to see you. Patrick Ottman there in Havana.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, CNN has announced that TV personality Kathy Griffin will no longer host the network's New Year's Eve program. This coming after photos were released that just about everyone found deeply offensive.
Yeah, no kidding. The photos showed Griffin holding up a bloody head resembling the US president. Quite extraordinary. Griffin now says she went too far, actually begging for forgiveness. President Trump says the disturbing picture was actually affecting his youngest son.
Saying this on Twitter, my children, especially my 11-year-old son Barron, are having a hard time with this. Sick. I think a lot of people would agree with the president on that. All right, up next, when we sit down to eat a meal, we often don't think of all the farm workers who made it possible, especially those who may be trapped into forced labor.
Now, coming up on the program, we'll speak to an activist trying to put an end to that. You're watching CNN Today. We'll be right back.
Indonesia, a culture in transition. Meet the people, trying to keep traditions.
We need to educate the people, the children, because the batik is our culture.
While creating a new modern identity.
Our mission is to draw global attention to the cuisine.
The Keepers, Saturday on CNN. Erin Burnett out front. Stories that matter.
You've got the money and you've got the passion, but how do you actually make a difference?
From the people making the headlines.
Did you and Donald Trump talk about his Muslim plan?
To wherever news breaks, Erin is there, one-on-one, in the field, and around the globe.
What makes you believe you can accomplish that sort of growth?
Erin Burnett out front, Sunday on CNN. Business is always changing. Keep up with CNN Money. Maggie Lake is live in the heart of the world's economic epicenter, New York City, tracking all the action of the stock exchanges and the big business stories from around the world. Get top analysis of market movement and a daily breakdown of financial headlines. CNN Money with Maggie Lake, tonight only on CNN.
Aisha Sasay in Los Angeles.
I'm John Falls in San Bernardino, California. You're watching CNN's breaking coverage of that mass shooting.
A couple hundred people here now marching onto City Hall here in San Francisco.
You didn't name Bill Cosby then. Many people again will ask the question, why now?
Donald Trump came all the way down here, and the issue of who would pay for the wall just never came up.
A deal can be done and can result in the release of some girls.
In the past several days, we've been shining the spotlight on modern-day slave labor in the agricultural industry right here in the U.S.
Well, today we're talking to Justin Dillon, who's joining us live from San Francisco, an activist who educates consumers to buy products that are made free of forced labor. He's also the author of a book, A Selfish Plan to Change the World. Great to have you with us, Justin. First of all, I'm just curious about how you came to learn about this issue and then became a passion for you.
You know, thanks for having me on. I learned about this issue like a lot of people do, through media. I was reading a New York Times article about 12 years ago while I was just going about my life and learned about this issue. And as I started to push further and further in, I realized one of the greatest levers we can use to address slavery is the marketplace, and that's where I landed.
Yeah, and you know, I was surprised to learn, you know, there are between, 20 to 45 million slaves in the world today, and that's according to various estimates. A lot of attention, though, is on the issue of sex trafficking, but labor trafficking actually makes up a larger percentage of the problem. Why doesn't it get as much attention, especially since it's something that, you know, impacts almost all of our lives in some way?
Well, it's true, and both are very important. But labor trafficking does find its way into our lives. In fact, it's most proximate to our lives because it finds its way into our lives through the products that we use. I'm not quite sure why that there hasn't been more attention. Certainly, CNN Freedom Project's done an amazing job getting the word out. But people are starting to understand this more and more. And I just know, just from the businesses and the consumers we work with, this is a top priority for a lot of folks. And even over the last 5 years, it's become a bigger and bigger issue for people, and people want to understand where is the slavery and the stuff that we use. And
a lot of people just don't know, so it's a matter of just informing them and educating them that it even exists, and then they'll get angry about it. What can that average consumer do to stand up against slavery? I know you've got an app. Tell us about that.
Well, I had the privilege of working with the U.S. State Department to build a website called slaveryfootprint.org. And when we worked together, the idea there was to not only educate consumers, but help them understand what their footprint looks like. And the website asks a very provocative question: do you want to know how many slaves work for you? And we started asking that question in 2011, and to date, over 30 million people want to know the answer to that question and have learned the answer to that question. And now those consumers are starting to walk into the marketplace going, great, well, who do we buy from and how do we be a part of the solution and not just being aware of the problem?
Yeah.
And also tell us more about your book, A Selfish Plan to Save the World. Those two things don't exactly go together, especially when you're having a selfish plan, right? But you also write in your book about your time fighting human trafficking, and you travel to Haiti. You talk about that in your book to educate singer and actor Common about modern-day slavery. Tell me about that trip.
That trip was amazing, and I got to do that with CNN. And slavery is one of those words and concepts, realities that's just so scary, and it feels like it's in the past. And quite frankly, it's not something that we feel like addresses or interacts with our everyday lives. And the opportunity to take just this amazing human being, Common, down to Haiti to meet kids that are trapped in slavery as indentured servants, it's reframed the reality that we all have dreams. The documentary we made together is called Common Dreams. We all have dreams for our lives. We all want better things for our families. And this is true universally. So what the Selfish Plan to Change the World is all about is that everyone I meet, all of my friends, all my family, we want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And being a part of creating freedom for others is one of the greatest opportunities that we have that's been given to all of us and all the viewers that are watching. And so I just believe that by getting involved in the problems of others, it actually gives back to us. That's the selfish part.
Yeah, and you can really achieve something as well, something truly meaningful. Wow, Justin Dillon, great work. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
You're an inspiration. Thank you for what you do. And that is our time, everyone. Thanks for watching. I'm Amara Walker.
I'm Michael Holmes. World Sport up next.